Good morning. Hi, I'm back again for another constitutional talk. And today I'd like to talk about Charles Pickney. Now, Charles Pickney is in our third banner. This is him in the color for coal. By the way, Charles Coates Pickney is right behind him with his arm outstretched towards Washington on panel 1. But the interesting thing about Charles Pickney is that he came with a plan. It's known as the Pinckney Plan. So right away out of the gate, you had the Virginia Plan and the Pinckney Plan. So they were gathering in Pennsylvania and Philadelphia for days. And each day they would go up to the convention hall and if we ruled there wasn't a quorum, they'd have to go away, and the next morning they'd go back. And this went on for a good week or so. Finally, once they did have a quorum, the first thing on the agenda was writing up the rules. So they set about a rules committee, and they elected a secretary, and then they adjourned with the rules committee seated and working on the rules. The next day, the rules were read, and following the reading of the rules, there were suggestions of some other rules. And then they went to the agenda, and on the agenda was the State of the Union. So in discussing the State of the Union and the problems they had, Randolph rose and brought forth the Virginia Plan. So they talked about that for most of the day. And it got fairly late, and Charles Pickney took the floor, and he presented the Pinckney Plan. Now, the two were quite different. The Virginia Plan is closest to what we have today. The Pinckney Plan is quite different. Now, when you fast forward to 1812, and this is important, John Quincy Adams was in charge of all the paperwork from the convention, and he was supposed to write it up and get a document, but the Pinckney Plan wasn't there. So they wrote to Charles Pickney and they asked him for a plan, and he submitted a plan. The problem with that plan was it didn't jive with the records of the convention. You see, Charles Pickney, he spoke on every subject just about every day. There wasn't anything he didn't talk about. So much so that they started to call him Constitutional Charlie. Our friend, Constitutional Charlie. Well, the plan he submitted just didn't jive. So the thing is, right away they were disputing it. Historians had disputed it. Now, whether he intentionally set up a fraudulent document is anybody's guess. But it could also be that he was working on changing his document as he went through it. But he did submit a document. And the first thing on the document was the same as the Virginia Plan, the style, it was called, or how you would write it up. The Constitution of the United States, or the United States and assembled presents this Constitution, or how it would be worded. But then it gets real different. Okay, in the Pinckney Plan, you have a House of Delegates elected by the people. And then you have a Senate that is elected from the House of Delegates. And you have a president who serves for life, and he is elected from the House and the Senate. The president will be called His Excellency, and he shall be the commander-in-chief of the Army and Navy, and he will have the right to veto, and he'll have the duty of enforcing the laws just like we have today. But what he can't do is he can't appoint judges, he can't appoint diplomats, he can't work on a treaty, he can't select judiciary nominees. See, all those things are done by the Senate. Okay, the House of Delegates has the same job as our House of Representatives, with one interesting distinction. It is their job to open and run a national college. There is no impeachment. So there's lots of different things here. The Senate gets to decide whether laws passed by the state are constitutional or not. So there was really a lot of differences in the two plans. And at the end of the day, it was decided that they were going to take the Virginia plan and they were going to take the Pinckney Plan, and they were going to put them side by side for the next day to discuss it. Eventually, the Pinckney Plan was kind of cast aside, and they worked off of the Virginia Plan. Later, they had a New Jersey plan that was brought, but that was a good month later. So Pickney might not have got everything he wanted, but one thing he did get was he got his plan looked at, and he got it presented, and he got a fair hearing for his plan. You see, he was important because he brought a plan, because the only other plan was from Virginia, the one James Madison had drawn up. So at least they had differences to look at. So I hope you get that, and I hope you better understand Charles Pickney and what he was trying to do. But even the cabinet members had to be chosen by the Senate, not the president. So the president was a weak body, even though he served for life. Well, now I'd like to read you from the records of the convention what the Pickney Plan says from minutes, from notes taken from another delegate. 1. A confederation between the free and independent states is hereby solemnly made, uniting them together under one general superintending government for their common benefit and for the defense and security against all designs and leagues that may be injurious to their interests and against all force and attacks offered to or made upon them or any of them. Now, this is not the style. This is a preamble to what would have been his Constitution. The second thing he puts down is the style, and that is what it would be named. 3, mutual intercourse, community of privileges, surrender of criminal faith to proceedings. 4, 2 branches of the legislature, a House of Delegates and a Senate, make up a Congress. The House of Delegates to consist of 1 member for every number to be decided, because you see this was just an outline, so same as the Virginia Plan. Per 1,000 of inhabitants, 3/5 of blacks included. The Senate to be elected from 4 districts. Now the plan he submitted said there are 3 districts, but these districts, the districts on the plan he submitted are a Northeast district, a Middle district, and a Southern district. And what that is the classes of the Senate. So the way we have it today, 1/3 is up every year. Well, his idea, 1/3 is up every year, but the third that's up is everyone from up north, then everyone from the middle, and everyone from the south. So it's a little different than what we're used to. So the Senate to be elected from 4 districts, serving a rotation of 4 years, to be elected by the House of Delegates from themselves by the people at large. The Senate and House of Delegates by joint ballot to choose the president from themselves or the people at large annually. So in this plan, he has an election for president every year. He shall be vested with the executive authority and the right to advise with the heads of the different departments of his council. Council of Revision consists of the President, Secretary of Affairs, War, heads of Department of Treasury, and Admiralty, or any 2 of them together with the President. 7. Members of the Senate and House shall each have 1 vote and be paid out of the common treasury. Time of elections to be specified. In the plan that he submitted in 1812, the House of Delegates determined the election time. No state may make treaties, lay imposts, keep a military base. All treaties in the plan he submitted in 1812 would have been done by the Senate. The president had nothing to do with them. Each state's rights is retained, not delegated. All laws must go through both branches of government before coming law. Now remember, in the Articles of Confederation, the states maintain sovereignty. And here it is the same. Exclusive powers of the House and Senate are in Congress. Congress shall have the exclusive power to regulate trade and levy imports, but each state may lay embargoes in time of scarcity. The establishing of post offices. The Senate and House of Delegates shall have the last authority in disputes between 2 or more states. The authority shall be exercised in the following manner. So instead of going to a court, you're going to a court of the House of Delegates. The Senate and House of Delegates shall institute offices, appoint officers for Department of Affairs, War, Treasury, and Admiralty. They shall have exclusive power to declare what is treason and mishap of treason against the United States, and of instituting a federal court to which an appeal shall be involved from the lower state court in question of construction of treaties made by the U.S. or the law of nations, or on regulations concerning trade and revenue. The court shall consist of judges to be appointed for life. Congress shall have the right of instituting each state a court of admiralty, appoint the judges and court of the same for all maritime cases. So a Congress will be able to appoint state courts. Congress shall have the right of coining money, regulating alloy and value, fixing the standards of weights and measures throughout the United States. The same is held today by the House of Representatives. Points in which the assent of more than a bare majority shall be necessary. Impeachment shall be by the House of Delegates before the Senate and judges of the Federal Judicial Court. Congress shall regulate the militia. So there's another big difference from what we agreed to in the end, was that Congress shall regulate the militias. Congress has no regulation over our militias. In fact, the only time the federal government has any regulation of it all is once the president calls them up for service. Means of enforcing the quota and compelling the payment of each state. So, in the beginning of our republic, each colony gave money to the Continental Congress to run the country. That was part of the reason for the counting of people every 10 years, was so you could determine the fees you had to pay to the federal government. The other, of course, was for purposes of redistricting. Manners and conditions of admitting new states. Power of dividing, annexing, consolidating states on the consent of the petition of such states. The assent of the legislature of states shall be sufficient to invest future additional powers in the United States in Congress assembled, and shall bind the whole Confederacy. Then the last. The Articles of Confederation shall be inviolably observed, and the Union shall be perpetual unless altered as before directed. So what we have here is amendments as was called for by the Constitutional Convention itself, because the original purpose of the Constitutional Convention was to preset amendments. So here Charles Pickney has given us 24 amendments. The Virginia Plan was a complete departure and a complete change, and it got rid of the Articles of Confederation. I just want you to understand what they were dealing with once they got into the convention hall. And it's interesting for that reason to look at the Pinckney Plan. My understanding is they've been looking at the Pinckney Plan to decide original intent at the Supreme Court. And that's really something we probably shouldn't be doing. It gives us an idea of what they were presented and what they didn't want. So, with that, I hope you followed me and have a good day.